Whenever someone asks me how much alcohol I've drunk on any particular day, my response is always, as much as I needed. I wouldn't call myself an alcoholic. I just like getting drunk. The neurological effects of whatever poisonous chemical is found in vodka ironically has a sobering effect on my mental health. Due to reasons that only a professional psychologist could adequately explain, I am constantly weighing the pros and cons of each one of my actions in an effort to determine what will benefit me most in achieving my personal goals. As I write this sentence, I am considering going to the store and buying food, but since I want to finish this review today, I'll handle the hunger for now. This is neither a shallow bid for praise, nor is it a cry for help. As far as I know, I don't have any real obsessive tendencies that could cause serious harm to me or others. I just hate wasting time. Before I went to college, all I did was waste time. Most of my days were spent exercising, playing video games, reading comics, and watching YouTube videos once that became a thing. Now these might seem like the average everyday goings-on of a regular American teenager, but to me it all felt like inaction. I knew what I wanted to be doing with my life, but at the same time I couldn't muster up any of the energy required to take action. So I resigned myself to a life of insipid complacency. I'd probably graduate high school with good grades, I'd probably attend a local university, make some friends, meet a nice girl, definitely not a boy, and then live out the rest of my life at some boring desk job wanting to kill myself. Because that's what people do. At least, that's what I assumed at the time. I was under the histrionic impression that everyone was as displeased with their current position as I was, and that they were just better at hiding it. If you currently feel like that, you should know that it isn't true. Most people are happy with their lives. Latest estimations put America's suicide rate at about 13 deaths per 100,000 people. If more people were suicidal, that would be a higher number, like 14. After I realized this, I decided to live my life doing things that I actually enjoyed. This meant that certain activities that had once dominated a significant portion of my free time, like playing video games, fell out of my daily rotation. I think the only games I played in college were like Persona 5, Yakuza 0, I know Pokemon Sun and Moon, Senran and Kagura, you get the idea. On occasion, I witnessed my younger brother playing Breath of the Wild or Splatoon. They seemed neat. He let me play Super Mario Odyssey for an afternoon, and I just kept reminiscing about how much fun Super Mario 64 was. But now I'm out of college, and I have a bit more free time. If I play a video game, it's either with my friends or for a stream. Sometimes both.
You can do it, Darren. I believe in you.
I've been drinking since like 4 p.m.
I believe in you.
I don't know if the game's lagging or if my brain is lagging. On some occasions, I'll start up a single-player game while in a Discord call with friends, and for whatever reason one night I decided to play Super Mario RPG Legend of the Seven Stars. It was just on my computer. I have thousands of old-school ROMs that I never play. Don't ask, I just like stuff. It was late at night. I was mostly playing it absent-mindedly, tossing back some brewskis. I'd beaten the game at least 3 times since it was released on the Nintendo Wii's Virtual Console in 2008. I would have been around 13 at the time I first played it. If you don't know what Super Mario RPG is, you probably know about the Paper Mario series or the Mario & Luigi series. I was gonna say the Paper Mario series for consoles or the Mario & Luigi series for handhelds, but then I remembered that's not really the case. Paper Mario is on consoles and handhelds, but the Mario & Luigi games are exclusively handheld. Why did they do that? You could have divided them up easily, Nintendo. Come on. Anyway, they're JRPGs, but with Mario in them. If you've never played a JRPG but want to start, I recommend any of them released before February 10th, 2009. I don't know, people say Bowser's Inside Story is good, but I just didn't enjoy it at the time. While doing research for this game, I found out that 2021 is actually the 25th anniversary of its release. Wow, Super Mario RPG is only a few years older than me. It could have groomed me on Discord. With our age difference, Super Mario RPG could be my magnanimous, comparatively mature boyfriend. The kind that knows the difference between a good bar and a bad bar, and wears a watch. I'm getting distracted. The game was released only a few months before the launch of the Nintendo 64, and with it, Super Mario 64. My first impression was that they sent this game out to die. I know they're technically different genres and would therefore have different audiences, but applying that line of logic to such a character-driven franchise like Mario seems impractical. I don't know who's playing this game without any familiarity with the red man known as Mario. If you like Mario, you're probably playing all his games, so if I were a child in 1996 forced to pick between which new Mario product I would want for Christmas, you're dang sure I'd pick Mario 64. If this weren't a Mario game, it very well could be languishing in relative obscurity, like, I don't know, Kid Cool, which released on the NES right when the Super Nintendo was coming out. Or Mark Davis Fishing Master, to name another Super Nintendo game from '96. Can you imagine the type of person who knows about Mark Davis Fishing Master? Can you imagine what kind of twisted individual would use that game's soundtrack for background music instead of Pokemon or some other recognizable series? Could you imagine? As the cookie crumbled, I wouldn't be born until a few years later, and thus my first experience with Super Mario RPG was not on a Super Nintendo. It wasn't even with the game. Growing up, I spent a long time scouring the internet just researching information about video games, usually Nintendo related, because I didn't really have anything better to do. In fact, the only reason I looked up information about Nintendo was because I only had Nintendo consoles, so if I were to look up anything related to video games, the only reference points I had were from Nintendo. Luckily, they are one of the biggest and most influential gaming companies of all time, so I never ran out of stuff. Thank God I wasn't an Amiga kid. Most of the time, my adventures on the World Wide Web would lead me to archival sites and fan forums, the odd Google video on occasion. But I was, and still am, a gamer. I was naturally drawn to the video game fan creations using the now defunct Flash player. Games like Super Mario 63 and Super Smash Flash occupied many an afternoon in my household. But the one thing that caught my attention more than any of those fan games was a cartoon by one Christopher Niosi, and that cartoon was called Roused Forest, Super Mario RPG. As a professional Smash Bros. Player, I know people younger than this video. What was created as a final project for his animation class quickly became one of the most recognizable creations on the internet in the late 2000s. And why wouldn't it be? It's pretty dang cool. Even though the lyrics are nigh incomprehensible at points, it's got a nice flow and fun animation. Not to mention that it's a song about a classic moment in a classic video game. A video game I hadn't even heard of. I thought it was some weird original character thing. I knew who Mario and Peach were, but Geno, Mallow, Croco, the significance of these characters was lost on my prepubescent mind. I just knew the song slapped, and that was good enough. I've probably listened to it hundreds of times over the years, no joke. Looking back, it's clear to me that my readiness to accept Super Mario RPG as a classic game, despite never having played it myself, probably came from my love of this music video. After all, why would Christopher Niosi put so much effort into an animation about a game that wasn't amazing? He even says in the song that it's a really good game, so it must be true. But I always thought it was weird that this game existed in the first place. Whose idea was it to take Mario, a character who's most known for not being in an RPG, and put him into an RPG? We take it for granted nowadays that Mario has RPG games because of the existence of the Paper Mario and Mario and Luigi series of games. Games that obviously wouldn't exist without Super Mario RPG's genre-breaking foray into turn-based combat. But that doesn't make it not weird. When Mario was first conceived within the mind of Shigeru Miyamoto for the 1981 arcade classic Donkey Kong, the character's only defining features were that he ran around and jumped. Sometimes he used a hammer and abused animals. None of those gameplay aspects naturally lend themselves to item management or magic systems. And at the time of Super Mario RPG's release in 1996, 15 years after Donkey Kong's arcade release, but only 2 years after Donkey Kong's now Sonic Game Watch release, his character hadn't really developed much further than his humble origins. In that span of time, his resume had grown to include a quadrilogy of classic platformers in the form of the Super Mario Bros. Series, in which the gameplay consists of running, jumping, and abusing animals, sometimes with a hammer if you're lucky enough to find the suit in Mario 3, but really, you should be using it to break the rocks to enter warp zones, I'm just saying. Speaking of Super Mario Bros. 3, it would be dishonest not to mention the item system. It exists. I can't deny that. And although the presentation of the item storage system is a bit different from what you'd find in a typical JRPG, it's really not that different. If we think about the functionality of items in typical RPGs, potions to restore health, ethers to restore magic, the names don't actually matter. What matters is at their core, they're just power-ups. After all, what does a mushroom do in Super Mario Bros. If not restore your health? There's no health bar, there's no stats, but there is a difference between having a mushroom and not. Instead of a range of numbers, it's just a binary switch, either at full health or half health. The same can be said of the fire flowers, and they're used as a rudimentary magic system. You start off with 0 magic points, or MP, and when you get a fire flower, that switch changes from 0 to 1, meaning that you now have magic. Are the Super Mario Bros. Games secretly RPGs? No. If we were to take any of the classic Mario side-scrollers, let's just go with Mario USA, and give them more robust systems, they might be able to pass as RPGs. It already has a party, it already has an actual health bar. All you need is a magic meter and leveling up. Why would you do this? I don't know. Mario games are what they are. I don't see the purpose in trying to stretch them and contort them into a game that's something it's clearly not trying to be. But I'm not the one who did that though. Nintendo did it when they made Super Mario RPG, Legend of the 7 Stars. Sure, Mario had been in a lot of different types of games when 1996 rolled around. He'd been in a cement factory, war, tennis, pinball, golf, school, a boxing ring, baseball, medical school, Tetris, kart racing, paint, school a few more times, tennis a few more times, Tetris and medical school at the same time, and a hotel.
No.
So why not make him an RPG, huh? Why not make Kirby a first-person shooter? Clearly nobody at Nintendo cares about game characters staying in their lane when it comes to Mario. We don't get a Star Fox water polo or Samus teaches macroeconomics. If you were to ask me in 1996 what first-party Nintendo franchise would make the most sense as a fun JRPG romp, I'd say The Legend of Zelda. You know, the RPG series. This seems really obvious to me, and I don't know why it hasn't been done yet. Not only does the setting lend itself to the JRPG aesthetic, it also fit into the series a lot more naturally. At the time of Super Mario RPG's release, the latest Zelda games were the ones on the Philips CDI. From the years 1991 to 1998, the only new Zelda games were for the Philips CDI. That's almost a decade, and instead of letting the Zelda fans have a crumb of happiness, they decided to give Mario an out-of-left-field JRPG 4 months before Super Mario 64 came out. Zelda fans were robbed. Don't tell me you don't want a Zelda RPG. Venturing through the land of Hyrule, which has plenty of established locations and characters that wouldn't be owned by Square and would therefore be allowed in future pieces of media. So that Geno Mii costume was a bit disappointing, I heard. Who is Geno? This is Geno. He's a little woodman. Not that woodman. He's a party character created specifically for Super Mario RPG and is therefore not wholly a Nintendo character. He's also owned by the actual creators of Super Mario RPG, Squaresoft, now known as Square Enix. It's kind of like how Donkey Kong was made by Nintendo, but his modern design came from the Donkey Kong Country SNES games, which were made by Rare. But now Rare is owned by Microsoft, so they have to do lots of legal shenanigans and contracts to have Donkey Kong and stuff. But he does get to have 2 Christmases. At the time of Super Mario RPG's release, Square had already made like 20 Final Fantasy games, so partnering with them was a pretty safe bet. They'd also made a Tom Sawyer RPG, which not only proved that they were capable of utilizing non-traditional RPG settings, but also that they thought blackface caricatures were okay. Remember kids, just because you made Rad Racer, that doesn't mean you can be a rad racist. Okay, let's actually talk about the video game now. Super Mario RPG starts off just like how you would expect a Mario game to start, with Princess Peach getting kidnapped by Bowser. Mario, who I guess was just spying on her from the window of his house, rushes out to save her. We see him traversing through a variety of areas, meeting the Toad Chancellor or whatever, and teaming up with Mallow and Geno. The title cards and iris shots for Mario, Mallow, Geno, Bowser, and Peach spotlight their importance in the game. Bowser and Peach's inclusion should be self-explanatory. They're the main villain and the end goal. Or at least that's what the first-time player might assume. The way this intro cutscene presents the game is pretty sneaky once you realize what it's doing. Mallow and Geno, who are the 2 new original characters, are shown to be Mario's companions in this adventure. And if this intro cutscene is to be believed, they are his only companions. When we see glimpses of the battle system, they are the only party members shown in action. The intro cutscene would have you to believe that this is a game about saving Princess Peach from Bowser, and there's definitely no giant swords. I respect Square's decision to withhold information from the player in this teaser reel. Ultimately, the twist would have little impact on someone's overall enjoyment of the game, but there's no reason not to keep it a surprise. Anyway, the game actually starts with Mario storming Bowser's castle, with beautifully rendered and super compressed 3D backgrounds. I think they look great, to be honest. If they were to remake Super Mario RPG, the one thing that I really want them to do is keep the visual style the same. I don't want them to redesign everything into this modern Mario art style where everything's a bit too saturated and colorful, and they better not change the camera angle. Super Mario RPG's isometric camera angle is iconic, to say the least. Whether or not it exists due to technical limitations is beside the point. Fixed camera angles and pre-rendered backgrounds may have fallen out of style at the turn of the century, but I don't think we have to pretend that they were bad. For the most part, they were actually pretty darn neat, and they added a cinematic flair to the presentation of some games. If you think games are more cinematic now, I would say yes, in cutscenes where the camera angle is fixed. But there are exceptions to everything. Super Mario RPG is one of them. While I do have nothing but fond memories of this game, the new memories I forged while replaying it are full of frustration and annoyance at whoever's idea it was to put platforming challenges in an isometric game that can only be played on a D-pad. Depth perception? Never heard of her. I'll go more into this later when I talk about the minigames, but this one nondescript swinging challenge, it wasn't even a puzzle. It took me an absurd amount of time. Getting onto these platforms and hitting the question block was by far the hardest section of the game. So, Square Enix, if you remake this game, don't change the camera angle, just let me rotate it. Or better yet, don't remake it. I'll manage just fine without a weird reimagining of one of my favorite games. Now, I'm just imagining a Super Mario RPG remake in the style of the Final Fantasy VII remake, just fully voice acted, beautiful character models. I just want to see people argue online about how big Gino's boobs should be. I've played the Mario & Luigi Superstar Saga remake on the 3DS and it was a lot of fun, but I've also played Mario & Luigi Superstar Saga on the Game Boy Advance, and that one's better. Just on a visual level, the original designs just had more character. Enemies were allowed to stray a little from the cut and paste corporate designs that have at this point overtaken the entire franchise. I'm just worried. The first enemy in this game is something called a Terrapin. He's kind of like a Koopa, but he's got this cool knight helmet on, like gauntlets. If you don't know, a Terrapin is a small freshwater turtle found in the old world. You know, the old world, like knights and stuff. It's cool. That's a fun enemy concept. If they remade the game, they just make it a Koopa. I know they would. I have no faith in them. I love Nintendo. They never do anything wrong. Please send me free games. So you fight your way through some of these Terrapins, and can I mention how great it is that there's no tutorial? Everything you need to know can be easily inferred, just by context clues. You run into an enemy, or jump on them if you're a Mario veteran, and once you make contact, the background shifts to this area-specific arena. Even the simplest of minds can tell the situation has changed. Mario looks at you as his body is surrounded by 4 grayish-purple buttons, the very same buttons on your Super Nintendo controller. If you're playing the Super Famicom version, the buttons would be a bit more colorful. A common complaint about Japanese role-playing games is the overabundance of menus and sub-menus that you have to navigate, which can be off-putting to those new to the genre. Mario RPG, a game assumingly with non-RPG fans in mind, excused this issue with its 4-button layout. It's still technically menus and sub-menus, but the presentation is a lot nicer. If I wanted to see the jump spell, for example, I would not have to scroll down to magic and then select it. The same goes for items and defending. It's like a keyboard hotkey, but not on a keyboard. One aspect of the battle system the game does have to explain though is the existence of timed hits, which would be hard to convey implicitly. Even when you know what they are, it can still be pretty difficult to know when you're doing them right. I could not tell you if I performed the time hit on Mallow's Thunderbolt spell once throughout my whole entire playthrough. I don't even know if there is a timed hit for Thunderbolt. I just looked it up. Apparently every move by the main characters has action commands, and that's what I figured, but it's nice to know what they are now. In later Mario RPGs, time hits are conveyed much clearer. See, in Super Mario RPG, your attacks do a certain range of damage every time, but when you do a timed hit correctly, the amount of damage you do goes up by an unspecified amount. A beginner might not be able to tell the difference between a high damage roll and a successful timed hit, but in later installments your damage is consistent. Side note, technically this isn't true, the damage is consistent in Super Mario RPG, there's just 1,000 variables you have to keep in track with a bunch of math, so it feels random when you're playing the game. In Paper Mario, if you do 4 damage to an enemy with your jump, you'll always do 4 damage until you level up or successfully perform a timed hit, which comes with a lot more visual flair and a separate damage count. There is some visual indication in Super Mario RPG, but it changes based on the character and their equipped weapon. You could hypothetically stumble upon timed hits just by mashing the attack button while the animation is playing. The primary audience for this game is, after all, kids, and kids get impatient. However, I doubt their feeble minds would be able to make the connection between the timing of their button presses and the increased damage. I don't think this is terrible or bad game design for timed hits to be taught through a tutorial. In fact, I appreciate it that they popularized, if not invented, the timed hit system, because I just think it's cool. Your first time playing this Bowser fight, you probably just start wailing on him because that's what you did to the other 4 terrapins, and that worked out pretty well. One big turtle is about equivalent to 4 smaller turtles, give or take a shell. Enemies don't have visible health bars in this game, so you don't know if what you're doing is effective. You have no reason not to assume you're winning because battles in this game have only worked in one way so far. Maybe you experimented with changing your target with the group of terrapins you're forced to fight. There would be no real benefit in doing so, but you could have done it. Either way, when Princess Peach tells you to attack the chain, you're just like, oh, okay, I'll do that then. Why couldn't there just be 2 health bars on the screen with Bowser's being really big and the Clink Links being really small? What is there to gain from hiding this information from the player? In any game, actually. Just so some party member can later have a move that tells you the enemy's HP? That's just a waste of a move and a turn. You'll notice that the footage on screen does not show Mallow using the move Psychopath to show the boss's HP. That's because I never used it. At least in some games, the HP bar stays when you scan the enemy, and in even better games, the HP bar will always appear when you fight an enemy of the same type. I realize that I'm just talking about Paper Mario now, so I'll move on. For a long time, I thought of this moment where Princess Peach tells you to attack the chain holding Bowser up as a lesson to players that some bosses have alternate win conditions, which just isn't true. There's no bosses like that. That was just a weird justification I had as a kid, but I never verbalized it, so I didn't realize how dumb it was. What it's actually teaching you is that sometimes you can interact with objects that don't seem like enemies, and that the most direct path in battle is not always the most optimal. Even the final boss of the game has multiple points which you can target. But that's a long way from now. We're still at the Bowser fight. Actually, we just beat Bowser. Players are then greeted with what I consider to be Square's biggest contribution to the Mario mythos: slapstick comedy. I've always said that explaining a joke is a lot like coming up with a metaphor, so I'll skip the play-by-play and just tell you that it's funny, and you can just believe me. Comedy in video games can be pretty hit or miss, especially in modern games where there's this expectation of quality due to the amount of money poured into development. When you have a realistically proportioned character in full motion with professional voice acting telling a joke, there's a lot that could go wrong. The facial animation could be weird, the voice actor's delivery might not hit the punchline in exactly the right way that the writer imagined, and that's just assuming that the game's writing is good. Super Mario RPG, just from the nature of being simpler, is allowed a lot more leeway. Anyway, you save the princess and the game's over. Just kidding, there's a giant sword. A giant sword that comes out of nowhere, narratively and literally. Well, it comes out of the sky, you know what I mean. If you were lucky enough to be born a Japanese child in the late 80s, early 90s, then you might not be aware that a giant sword was in the game. After all, the intro cutscene cleverly hides this fact. It wasn't a quick shot for the game's commercial, but it's so quick that nobody would blame you for not remembering it, especially when there's just a lot of other stuff going on. It's also nowhere on the Japanese box art cover. Yoshi's on the cover though, as if he was supposed to be a party member. I can't find any information to support this claim though. Maybe Japanese people just like Yoshi a lot and they had a 3D model of them, so they just threw it on the cover. Why not? It's a little false advertising. The giant sword is on the American box art, spoiling the surprise for everyone. I mean, sure, it's more interesting visually than the plain white background, but clearly, the original creators were attempting to create an interesting moment for the player that's just thrown out of the window. For what? Advertising? Marketability? What's weird was that they never mentioned it in the Nintendo Power article that revealed Super Mario RPG either. They specifically mention in Nintendo Power, volume 77, page 28, that Mario will have to contend with the baddies, quote, led by Bowser, and then proceeds to only mention classic Mario enemies and none of the cooler ones, like Chained Kong. They mention Rare in Donkey Kong Country in the article. Why not mention that one of his less fortunate relatives makes an appearance in the game? Put that on the box! Right above that, the article mentions Mario will meet Princess Peach, Toad, Yoshi, and 9 other main characters, including Pinocchio, which I guess means Gino, but why'd they call him that? His name is Gino in every language. Did they just not know his name and just assumed it was Pinocchio? Maybe the Pinocchio line is supposed to be a joke. This article does have jokes. On page 27, I quote, "Instead of a two-dimensional sprite, Mario weighs in as a fully rounded character. In fact, he looks like he's been spending too much time in Italian restaurants. Putting Mario through his paces in Super Mario RPG might help our hero lose a few pounds." Reading this, I got the impression that the author maybe hadn't actually played the game themselves. At their own admission, it was only 70% done at the time and probably nowhere near getting translated. There's also no mention of the turn-based combat. The writer seems perplexed at the title Super Mario RPG. They even say the battles take place in real time. Technically, everything takes place in real time, so they're not 100% wrong, but considering this is a game advertisement, I find it a bit misleading. Maybe that was intentional. Here's the Japanese box, and now the American box. Japanese, American. Notice something? Notice something glaringly out of place, gaudy, and frankly amateurish? I'm not talking about Yoshi. When they brought this game over from the Far East, for whatever reason, some suit and tie at Nintendo of America thought that Super Mario RPG was too simple a title and decided to slap on the subtitle, Legend of the Seven Stars. Now, if this game were only called Legend of the Seven Stars in Japan as some bold, artsy move by Shigeru Miyamoto, then I would understand adding the Super Mario RPG part for clarification. But I don't understand the reverse. Legend of the Seven Stars is not an inaccurate title, I just find it superfluous. Nothing is gained by tacking it onto the end, and it downright soils the game logo. The original Japanese Super Mario RPG was clearly crafted with care. It's in the specific Super Mario font that will later become ubiquitous, and the 3D text is tilted inward to highlight the fact that the game is in 3D. Meanwhile, you have this generic sans serif font that is in 3D, but every word is at the exact same angle as if you were to simply extrude the text in Photoshop. By the way, I got those Nintendo Power Scans on a site called archive.contact.net/sotss.classicgaming.gamespy.com. It looks like an early 2000s fan site for Mario RPGs. Digging around a bit, I found these banners, which feature this link, classicgaming.com/SOTSS. SOTSS stands for Secret of the Seven Stars. I typed this website into my search bar and it took me to IGN.com. Wow, what a world. Did you know that IGN, formerly known as the Imagine Games Network, owns other sites like Rotten Tomatoes and GameSpy? I didn't. Moving on. This generic, unnamed Toad is one of the most interesting and influential characters in the Mario franchise. This Toad nonchalantly provides a solid brick of world building that persists in the Mario world to this day. He says, upon learning that Mario has returned without Peach, "Would you please bring her back, like you always do?" You don't look impressed. This is the first time that a Mario mythology has been established. All those other games, they're connected on a deeper level than just the numbers. The events of those other games have affected the world, and the characters in that world acknowledge this. I know it seems simple, but this is a problem that even modern games can't get right sometimes. The fact that you're a malevolent god of destruction in the Grand Theft Auto games has little impact on the setting, or even the story. But here, you're Super Mario, and that means something. You've beaten Bowser at least 3 times. You've gone through all those worlds. You, the player, have done that. You and Mario are on the same page, you're in sync. When strangers meet Mario, they don't believe it's him. If Clark Kent walked up to you in the street, you wouldn't recognize him. You know what you say? You'd say, "Hey, you look just like Superman." Because you could never imagine that a being of such significance, a legend in the flesh, would occupy the same space as you. It's not until he shows off his signature ability to jump, to leap tall buildings in a single bound, would you believe. So true is it for the inhabitants of this world. Mario's identification is his ability, his actions speak for themselves. So dang right, I'll bring back Peach like I always do, with or without my brother Luigi. Oh shit, they think my food's here. Sometimes it's a lot of work to make food. Nope, to make anime. Nope, to make video game reviews. So sometimes you get hungry and you want to eat. I have bad habits, I'm sorry. It's not what do you want from me? A realization struck me as I replayed this part. I don't know if you actually have to talk to this Toad to advance the plot forward. Throughout the game, I found myself going out of my way to talk to each and every Toad. I've done this every time I've played Mario RPG. I know which ones give you things, I know which ones don't. I still talk to them all. Actually, there was something new I discovered through this playthrough. At a certain story beat, 2 characters who you meet in the Mushroom Kingdom now show up in a new location. I wondered, are they no longer in the Mushroom Kingdom? So I ran back and checked, and sure enough, they were gone. I just thought that was pretty cool. I won't soliloquize about how the world feels real or lived in, because I don't even know if the world I'm living in is real. The only reason I don't consider the toads in Super Mario RPG real is because they're on my computer screen. However, most of my friends are accessible only on my computer screen too. I know I'm real, well, because I'm doing things. Computer simulation or coma, things are happening and I am experiencing them. You, on the other hand, are just words on a screen, lines of code. You might as well be a toad. The only way you can prove you're not a toad is by going to patreon.com/Dunekun and donating. Toad offers to give Mario a few tutorials. I feel like my opinion on tutorials should be clear by now, but it's not like I care that much. I just value as much immersion as possible, and a character stopping everything to explain simple concepts is less preferable to learning through gameplay alone. Anyway, as Mario moves through the tutorial area of the Mushroom Way, he combats the more familiar Mario enemies, Goombas, Sky Koopas, familiar faces to reassure the player that even though a giant talking sword showed up, this is still a Mario game. For those players with a particularly caring heart or just a taste for blood may help Toad out and be rewarded with some items. It pays to lend a hand, but there aren't any consequences for minding your own business. Eventually, your forward progression will be blocked by a large hammer brother, who then turns into 2 large hammer brothers. When you kill one, the remainder gets a stat boost, kinda like the Highlander, or Jet Li's the One. Upon defeating the mini-boss, Super Mario RPG lies to you. For defeating the hammer brothers, you get the hammer weapon, thus making the logical connection in your mind that some enemies drop weapons, which is not true. This is a one-time situation. No other boss in the game gives you an item for beating them, even stranger considering the other bosses are weapons. Well, some of them. The theme is very loose. It's really not a theme, it's just sort of a thing that happens. That's the most damning thing I can say about Super Mario RPG. Sometimes things happen. Because most of the time, the game feels like one complete product. Transitioning from exploring the adventure map to the battles to the story feels entirely seamless. It's a whole piece of art. A soft, cuddly blanket that you wrap around yourself, or a nice bowl of soup. Journalistic integrity obligates me to reveal that at this point in writing the review, I became painfully aware how cold my room was, and subsequently went to don my Mario-themed pajama pants. They don't have pockets, presumably because the creators assumed that any person childish enough to wear these had nothing of value to hold. Super Mario RPG changes up some aspects of the traditional JRPG formula to service the game's momentum. In a time before waypoints and mini-maps, sometimes the game would let go of the player's hands and they would be left with the feeling of, wait, where do I go next? Super Mario RPG sidesteps this problem by having the player navigate a world map more akin to a Super Mario World than any Final Fantasy. You can't get lost. All the important locations are right there. I'm sure they could have made this a connected world, but that would have been dumb and annoying. Nobody wants to backtrack through platforming puzzles. In conjunction with the simplified traversal system, Super Mario RPG's plot never leaves a moment hanging. Whenever you collect another MacGuffin-y star piece, there's always a scene setting up the next story section, and even if you aren't paying attention, you can always just go to the new location on the minimap. You don't have to wander around in perpetuity, talking to every NPC to patch together some idea of where you're supposed to go. It is, after all, a game for dumb babies. Allow me to quote David, king of Israel, and author of the biblical book Psalms, and say, "Those babies know what's up." Occasionally, when you defeat an enemy in battle, a little speck will shoot out and go, HP max, attack up, defense up. The effects of these boosts should be self-explanatory. Attack and defense up are cool, but HP max is really what you're hoping for. Every time you get a bonus and it's not HP max, you feel a little bit robbed. I do, I mean. I don't know my CDU. This is a video about my experience playing the game. Rarely are you ever in such critical danger that an HP max can turn the tide of a battle, but I don't think that's the purpose for their inclusion. They're random after all. If Nintendo wanted to put in a safety net, they could have just done that. Bonuses are just fun. Sometimes you can get once agains, which let you attack once again. And you can get these multiple times in a row too. It's awesome. These 4 bonuses, boni if you will, were included to make the game less tedious, because Super Mario RPG is an RPG, so some tedium is implied. Sometimes you don't want to go into your menu and use one of your mushrooms. Sometimes you don't want to take another hit of damage because there's still a Goomba looking at you. Let's just speed some of this along, you know? Now the last boni, I lied to you, there's actually 5. The last boni is the Lucky Yoshi one. You get to play that little ball and cup game, and if you win, you double your XP. The game rewards a skilled player. You can't fault that. You just can't. Some might say the abundance of systems in place to graciously cushion the player's experience might make the game too easy for the hardcore RPG fan. And to that I say, I haven't even gotten started. You don't even know. I have memories of always running out of coins in this game as a kid, so I was pretty stingy with my item usage, but since the game has a limited item storage, I just found myself getting rid of items all the time because I didn't have any space. Part of this is because of the HP max stuff, but also freebies. Sometimes when you use an item, you'll get a freebie. No fuss, no mess. No stress, no mess. I still did run low on money at a point, but that's because I refused to sell valuable equipment that I'll never use again. I like having it. But hey, most of the hotels are free. I like that. I wish hotels were free in real life, or at least cheaper. I like going across the country to see my friends. I don't like it when the hotel bill is the same as the airplane flight. That seems excessive. Some of you veterans of the world might say, just find a cheap motel or something. Well, I tried that. I was on some website looking at hotels that one had 4 stars. It was pretty cheap. I thought it was pretty good. I sent it to my dad to get his expert opinion, and he told me, with no humor in his voice, that is a crack den. So I stayed at a Marriott. It was great. Hotels should be free though. You know what else is free? Minigames. There are technically 10 officially recognized minigames in Super Mario RPG. I didn't know 2 of them existed before today. The first of which I feel really bad about because it's called Beatlemania. You know, like Beatlemania, the 1960 pop culture phenomenon wherein the British rock group The Beatles took over pop culture and not coincidentally the minds of teenagers across the world. I love the Beatles. Not only are they my favorite band of all time, they're my favorite people. I've listened to podcasts about the Beatles. I've seen every Beatles movie. I've read books about the Beatles. I've read books written by the Beatles. John Lennon said the N-word. I think that's hilarious. I could talk about the Beatles forever. When I was 13, I listened to Andrew Jackson's Jihad and was depressed. Now I listen to the Beatles and I'm doing better. The fact that this minigame existed and I didn't know it was called Beatlemania upsets me. Hey, I just thought of something. There are Beatles references in both this game and Earthbound. That's 2 amazing JRPGs. 2 of them. You gotta listen to the Beatles. I'm talking to you, my friends, who don't listen to the Beatles or say the Beatles suck just to upset me. Most of the minigames in Mario RPG are pretty lame. I mean, they're not bad and I'm sure they have their fans, but I think they're pretty lame. And they're not really worth doing, to be honest. Like, usually they just give you frog coins, which are only useful for buying unnecessarily good items. And I mean, totally unnecessary. At no point during a regular playthrough of this game will you need an experience booster or coin doubler. The one minigame that gives you something different is Tarkovsky's Tadpole song thing. You have to basically make sheet music. NPCs will give you a melody and then you have to play it with the tadpoles. I don't know if you can even call this a minigame. It's not fun, you're just memorizing. Granted, I was pretty bad at it. Anyway, for winning, you're allowed to buy unnecessarily good healing items that there's really no need for in a game of this difficulty. Minigames are bad, but they're not equally bad. The worst one, by far, is the Yoshi race. The mechanics are allegedly simple. Press A and B in time with the rhythm. Now, I can keep a beat. I've beaten both Parappa the Rapper games and Jammer Lammy. I skipped school one day just so I could play Persona 4 Dancing All Night on my PlayStation Vita. I got all the trophies. I can keep a beat. If I know what beat I'm supposed to keep too. The game lies to you. This toad says I'm doing a good job during the tutorial when I speed up with the song, but when the actual race starts, if you speed up with the song, Yoshi will stop. You have to keep in beat with a certain part of the song in your mind. The game does not tell you this. Luckily, the game is gracious and gives you Yoshi cookies which boost you forward regardless of your current acceleration. Using this, you can beat the race with minimal stress. You don't even have to win the race to win the race. This footage clearly shows Boshi beating me, but everyone still says I won, so I'll just roll with it. I don't actually want to talk about minigames that much. In my notes, I called a lot of things minigames that aren't listed as official minigames on the Mario Wiki section for minigames, so my favorite minigames were the ones you hide behind Booster's curtains and the ones where you had to jump over Dodo's peck. They're the simplest, but they spoke the most joy. A lot of the other ones, whatever. Oh, I said Yoshi was the worst minigame? That's still right. The second worst though is the 3D maze. Screw that hot garbage. That was awful. You may be asking, Dune, what's your point? Sure, Super Mario RPG has some weird game design choices when examined under a microscope, but they're not that weird, so I don't know why you've gone into such detail about it. Don't you understand that the details are where the heart of the game lies? Most games that come out are perfectly playable. You can pop them in, turn your brain off, perfectly fine games. Super Mario RPG Legend of the Seven Stars is a great game. Enough people have corroborated this notion that I don't really feel the need to tell you that it's good. In fact, if you clicked on this video or any video about Super Mario RPG and thought the reviewer was gonna badmouth it, you're an idiot. Also, the person who thinks Super Mario RPG is a bad game is also an idiot. Not me though. I'm interested in the seams of a game, how the sausage gets made. It's a good sausage. Speaking of sausage, this is Mallow. He's not a sausage. He's also not a frog. Spoilers, by the way. He says he's a frog, but he can't jump. He's also a bit of a crybaby. That's unrelated to his frogness. Mallow was probably the least interesting party member in Super Mario RPG, despite being the first one you get, and the one with the most character development. In fact, I don't think any of the other characters even have arcs. It's not that type of game. If you wanted that, I'm sorry. That's right, I made this game. I just hate Mallow's design, mostly. He's a fine enough character. Just that when I look at him with all his lumps and bumps, it just unsettles me. Looks like a cauliflower, which I do like, but I don't want to look at. I remember as a kid, my least favorite character was this Chancellor guy. I have no explanation. He doesn't do anything egregious or even noteworthy. His scenes with Mario are some of the funniest in the game. But whenever I think about him, there's this feeling in the back of my brain that's just contempt. I don't even know where it comes from. As for the other characters, Mario is, Mario. He barely qualifies as sentient. His sole motivation starts and ends with doing the right thing. Now that's not inherently a boring character trait, and he does express some semblance of a personality through his pantomiming antics. For example, I know that Mario is not RoboCop. He cares about the rules, but he's warm. He's on familiar terms with his local community. People trust him around children. I wouldn't go as far as to say he's Christ-like, but as a mascot character goes, he bears more resemblance to Superman than Mickey Mouse. Historically, Mickey Mouse causes more problems than he solves, unless it's in House of Mouse, where he got his act together a bit more. When things go wrong, the citizens of the Mushroom Kingdom look to Mario to solve all their problems, from the kidnapping of their monarch to getting your wallet stolen. I'm actually not sure if Mallow counts as a citizen of the Mushroom Kingdom. I'm not aware how severe the gerrymandering is on the map screen. I assume it's all the Mushroom Kingdom until you get to Nimbus Land, because that's the second time you see a new monarch. I guess Booster is a king too, or something. He's the 7th in a lineage of boosters. There's a pass named after him, so he must be important. Only important things have passes, like Xbox Game and Snake. If you believe the map, then the entirety of the Mushroom Kingdom amounts to just the town surrounding the castle. So, I don't believe the map. I think that's dumb. Maybe I just don't like the idea of most of Mario's adventures being confined into this one corner of the map. It makes what he does seem less important. It's the difference between saving the world and just saving a town, you know? A town can't be a kingdom. It's a principality at best. Now that I'm thinking about it, Mario's time in the Mushroom Kingdom has been minimal. Only the first 3 Super Mario Bros. Games take place in the Mushroom Kingdom. Before that, he lived in Brooklyn, New York. Super Mario World takes place in Dinosaur Land, and Super Mario Land takes place in Sarasa Land. Sarasa Land is one word. Also, if you were to leave a comment telling me that Mario 2 takes place in a dream world called Subcon, you're a fake fan. Everyone knows that the reskin Doki Doki Panic is not the real Super Mario Bros. 2. I call it Super Mario USA, derisively. My point is that the significance of the Mushroom Kingdom as a central location is mostly just in my head. You know, none of the mainline 3D Mario games take place in the Mushroom Kingdom either. Super Mario Sunshine has Mario vacationing on Isle Delfino. Super Mario Odyssey spans the whole world. Both of the Galaxy games are off-planet. Super Mario 64 technically takes place in the Mushroom Kingdom, but by some cruel twist of fate, by Monkey's Paw wish, all of the portrait paintings transport Mario to different worlds that are God knows where. Why do I care about the Mushroom Kingdom so much? Maybe it's just the marketing. When I was little, about 4th or 5th grade, I used to make these comics on printer paper that I'd take out of my mom's office. I think she still has a few of them in her filing cabinet. I'm not gonna ask to see them. Even at the time, I knew they weren't very good. Structurally, they were mainly influenced by the two comic series I read most often, which were Dragon Ball Z and Garfield. So it was an action series with a whole cast of characters and power levels and super moves, but the panel layout was 3x3. Now, anybody who knows anything about comic layouts is probably cringing right now. Obviously, action set pieces had to be limited in scope because there's only so much room on the row of panels. That really didn't bother me too much though, I was a kid. And when kids write, they don't have any life experience, they just write about what they like. And I like Mario games, so my stories always featured Mario as the main character, or Baby Mario, who I related to more at the time. Other video game characters would show up, Pac-Man, I remember being featured prominently, sort of Mario's rival. I had played Sonic Adventure 2, and even as a kid I knew that it was just leagues below Super Mario Sunshine, but Pac-Man World 2, that was a real contender. But no matter how many characters or weird ideas I threw in there, like Piranha Plant having his own spin-off comic, or the full Broadway-styled musical I tried to get my family to perform, all of the stories took place inside the Mushroom Kingdom, because that's just where Mario's stories took place for me. It was more the idea, this magical place that Mario escaped to after a life of working class complacency. Who wouldn't want to go to the Mushroom Kingdom? Real life sucks. That's why comics are made. It's an escape. I've gotten sidetracked. There's these things in the world called hidden treasures. Sometimes when you're hopping around, you'll discover a hidden block. I'm sure some Japanese game designer thought this was a really cool idea. I hate him. Or her. Them. Progressive. Do they not understand by hiding blocks in the world with no indication as to where they might be, they have cursed thousands of video game enjoyers to jump on every tile of the game as to not miss any rare items? I know you get an item to help you find them later, but that's later. There's hours of gameplay between then and now, and first time players won't know that item exists. Is the point of hidden blocks just to extend the playtime, to make sure that you're investigating every nook and cranny? There's not that much hidden stuff in the game, and none of it's worth the time you'd spend looking. If you like the hidden blocks in this game, please leave a comment explaining why you hate yourself. At this point in the game, about 35 minutes in, you could have already missed a collectible. When this toad is leading you to the Chancellor's chambers, you can jump on his head and grab yourself a frog coin. There is no way to know that this is there without someone telling you, and if you miss it, you cannot get it without starting a new save file. I wish I had the footage of getting it, but I don't, because it's really hard. Coming up is my favorite boss fight. It's against this guy named Croco who's a thief, and stealing is my least favorite crime, so beating up a thief makes me happy. That's not why he's my favorite boss, it's also because his name is Croco, which is very similar to the name Croc, and Croc, Legend of the Gobbos, was a game for the original PlayStation and PC that I played on our New Year's Eve stream. As you can see, fuck! What a bunch of...
I believe in you, dude.
What a bunch of bullshit. It wasn't very good. So, I think of this boss fight as an outlet for my feelings towards Croc. I wish I could cast Fire Orb on the real Croc, but then I couldn't beat the game. And if I can't beat Croc, then my friend C2OL will stop talking to me. At this point in the game, you've probably leveled up a few times and noticed that when you do level up, you get the option to choose one of these stat boosts. Super Mario RPG Legend of the Gobbos makes the interesting decision to have these extra stat boosts be unequal. Sometimes you can gain a lot more health points than you do attack points, so it makes more sense to just choose health even if you want more attack. To me, this ruins their basic character customization ideas by making optimization laughably easy. The worst part is that it's not even random. At level 2, upgrading your magic will always be the best option. Level 3, you upgrade attack, and level 4, you upgrade health. And so on and so forth. There's probably some weird shenanigans that you could do by only upgrading attack and just steamroll through every enemy, but for an average playthrough, it makes sense to just follow the pattern, right? I know I'm complaining about a choice, like Nintendo is not forcing me to do anything, but they put it in the game for a reason, they want me to do that. I hold a similar philosophy in regards to the items known as the lazy shells. If you don't know, Super Mario RPG has 2 overpowered hidden items, one weapon for Mario and one armor for Peach. Well, technically anyone can use the armor, but you give it to Peach because she's the healer. And yes, they're both called lazy shells. I just think it's weird to put an item in the game and then call your players lazy for using it. That's mean, but they do basically make the game a cakewalk after you get them. But you get them so late in the game that it doesn't really matter. The game's already easy, and you'll want the lazy shells for some of those endgame sections, but I'll get to that when I get to that. Once you get back to the Mushroom Principality, you'll find it overrun with shy guys on pogo sticks, colloquially known as shysters. When you save this one toad, it'll say he's shaken, not stirred. You should watch my All of the Other Reindeer review if you want to know how I feel about that line. In short, I don't like weird references. Or maybe I just don't like James Bond, because the boss's name in this game are full of references, and they make me smile. Let's go through a few, shall we? Balom is a gross, vaguely animalistic minor boss that always talks about how hungry he is. The name Balom is a direct translation of the Japanese name Beromu, Bero being a colloquial word for tongue or licking something. If you actually wanted to localize the name, it should have been Lickitongue, but I think that's already taken. Punchinella is a real word that refers to a short, comical-looking person. That doesn't seem fair to Punchinello, since that description could also apply to literally every Mario character. Also, people have said he's named after Pulcinella, who is a character in Italian theater and puppetry. His Japanese name is Puppetto, which sounds like the word puppet, so I guess he's a puppet. Names are dumb. Have you ever looked at this guy and thought he could run a production? Me either. So, when I found out the word booster is a synonym for Bookie and his Japanese name is Bookie, I thought that was weird. What part of his character is related to booking events? Just that he knows clowns? Knife Guy and Great Guy. Real original names, Nintendo of America. But I guess it's better than the alternative. In Japanese, they're just the Clown Brothers. Knife Guy, yeah, that's a fitting name. Why is he Great Guy? Shouldn't it be Ball Guy? I kind of get what they're going for, they both cut things, but Great Guy doesn't cut things. They should be slice and dice, or sharp and dull. Screw it, just call them the Clown Brothers if you can't think of anything better. Bunt is a cake boss, but he's not the cake boss. I don't want to talk about bosses anymore. Well, I guess I could talk about my favorite boss. The real first boss in the game is this guy named Mac. You can tell he's associated with Smithy because he's like a little sword and you just saw a big sword. It's a theme, it's theming. Nice. Actually, all of Smithy's gangs are weapon-based, but Mac's the only bladed weapon. In Japanese, his name is Kenzoru, which is derived from the Japanese word ken, which means sword. Since the giant sword's name is Exor, which is a shortening of Excalibur, maybe Mac could have another name related to the Arthurian legend. I think it should have been a shortening of Conwenin, which was King Arthur's dagger. Maybe Conwy or Conan. Wenny? Instead, the translator opted for a pop culture reference. Mac's name comes from a German musical opera named Die Dreigroschenhopper, where the song was called Die Mordjagd von Macker Masser, The Ballad of Mac the Knife. The song details the various crime of this Mac character: arson, rape, and my favorite crime, murder. Naturally, this song was a hit in the 1950s. In the 80s, McDonald's made commercials with a character called Mac Tonight, who sang a song inspired by Mac the Knife. Coincidentally, McDonald's also murders people. I really don't have that much to say about this game. I just wanted to bring up the Mac the Knife thing. I like Bobby Darin's version of the song. That's the version that really blew up and made it a standard. Dave Van Ronk actually does a beautiful live rendition. It's so different and raw. The complete opposite of Bobby Darin's version. They're both good. Like this game. Let's keep talking about it. Super Mario RPG's story is pretty atypical for a JRPG. For one, it's pretty easy to explain to your parents, and for two, there isn't much emphasis on the characters. I'll be honest, my knowledge of Japanese role-playing games is pretty limited, but that being said, you have to agree with me when I say that Mario RPG's characters are kinda flat. Ironically, Paper Mario's characters have more depth. Let's start with Mario. As far as RPG protagonists go, his silence is nothing out of the ordinary. Personally, I wish Mario talked more. It's really funny. There's a thin line between generally good guy and mindless automaton that Mario seems to walk in every one of his iterations. Only in side games and supplemental media are we allowed to see Mario crack a joke or say pasta power. Some of you may say Mario shows a whole bunch of personality in this game. He pantomimes and reacts to things. And to that I say, I don't care. The miming antics are fun to watch, but they reveal next to nothing about his character. Which is a weird thing to talk about in a Mario game now that I think about it, and I don't know why I wrote this section. But no. We can't hold Mario to a different standard than we hold regular characters. This is just a side tangent that's not even in the script. I just think it's weird I realize that it is weird to compare Mario to like literary, like the Great Gatsby or something, but there's no reason why we have to. Like, just because Mario has traditionally been kind of boring, we have to like, it's fine that he's boring. I'd hate to be stuck in a room with him for an extended period of time. What would I say? I love your work? Maybe he'd be insulted. I could ask him how Princess Peach is doing, but based on him being in a room with me for an extended period of time, I imagine she's relatively fine. Although he seems like a good listener, Mario doesn't seem like the type to have emotionally honest conversations with loved ones. I wonder what Mario smells like. Do you think he wears cologne? If so, what kind? He's a working class guy, but he runs in some highfalutin circles. He also does a lot of running, in boots no less. Why does he wear the same thing every day? Oh, that's right, he only has 2 pairs of clothes. How utilitarian. Mario is clearly a man of simple pleasures. He lives to work. He eats of the earth. His only amusement, people, and sometimes cake. In all my experience playing Nintendo games, Mario has never learned a lesson. He's never had an emotional challenge to overcome. Why is that? Even in other Nintendo games, the protagonist is at least threatened by their enemies. Ridley killed Samus's parents, Olimar is stranded on an alien planet, Donkey Kong's home is under attack, and his bananas are gone. Has Mario ever been scared of Bowser? Has he ever taken Bowser seriously? It's a joke in this game, how pathetic Bowser is compared to Mario. The only character who shares comparable behavior to Mario is Kirby, but Kirby is a child who lacks the emotional intelligence to fear a big penguin with a hammer, let alone the cosmic horrors that always make themselves known in the end of his games. The quote-unquote beef between Mario and Bowser is so inconsequential that he joins your party. He also joins the party. Nintendo really likes to flip-flop on whether they think Bowser should be a big scary monster or a fun dad. Everyone's talking about how cool he looks in the Bowser's Fury expansion for Super Mario 3D World, but let's not forget, on that same disc, in the same game, he is a furry. In Super Mario RPG, Bowser is actually a pretty fun character. He's brash, braggadocious, and generally pretty bossy. But he also has a sensitive side. You can tell that he does have genuine love for his troops. There's a scene in Monstro Town where you meet up with one of Bowser's minions named Jagger. Jagger has been spending the time since Bowser's castle got taken over to train in this dojo to get stronger. Bowser gives Jagger permission to stay in Monstro Town and continue his own personal journey of self-realization. See, that's good characterization, and there's multiple scenes like this with every type of Bowser baddie. Bowser is my favorite character in the game. Mallow is my least favorite. Mallow is the only main character to go through a traditional character arc. If Mario wasn't the main character, it'd be Mallow. If you ever played a Fire Emblem game, you probably understand this character dynamic. Mario is a stand-in for the players, whereas the narrative role of protagonist falls to the character with actual speaking lines. When you first meet Mallow, he proves to be a weak crybaby whose only redeeming quality is the spell HP Rain. He also thinks he's a frog. We soon learn that he's not actually a frog, but a weird cloud thing, and if he wants to find his parents and toughen up, he should go with Mario. To make a long story short, we find his parents and he toughens up. There's a subtle callback in one scene that exemplifies his arc perfectly. When you find Yardovich in the forest, Mario tries to rush in, fists ablaze. Mallow responds, "Who do you think you are, Bruce Lee?" Everyone is uncomfortable at the mention of a real human being in the Mario game. Later, when Mallow discovers that his parents are in trouble, he rushes off alone. And I will say this, the emotional climax of Mallow's arc got me like, damn bro. And that's not an easy task. I know when a game is trying to trick me into feeling emotions, and I'll usually play along because I enjoy the art of storytelling, but rarely does a game induce a reaction stronger than what the creators were probably going for. It's established the first time that you meet Mallow that he's a crybaby, and then whenever he cries, it rains. And throughout the game, Mallow constantly is resolving himself to become strong and keep his emotions in check. But when you beat the boss in Nimbus Land, the penultimate level in the game, and you save Mallow's parents, and they're finally reunited after a lifetime apart, the game has Mallow run off to greet them alone, and you stay in the courtyard with Mario, allowing the moment to breathe in your mind. And as you do, for the first time since the beginning of the game, rain starts to pour. Damn, bro. But he's just kinda whiny, and not in a cool way, like me. I just think that Nintendo already had a weak, cowardly character who I'd like to see in the game rather than a talking popcorn man. And yes, you're probably gonna tell me that Luigi's personality had not yet been established in the Mario canon. If you're a Baka Gaijin, Super Mario Bros. The Great Mission to Rescue Princess Peach was a 1986 movie wherein Luigi is characterized as not only being cowardly, but also stingy with money. It's a great contrast to this pure-hearted Mario. And that's also why they made Luigi a coward in the Super Mario Bros. Super Show. It's his natural place. And that's why if they want to make a new Mario RPG, they should include Luigi. The story continues on and you enter the Kero sewers. Now, the last time I had seen this section of the game was when I watched my buddy Kaiju-kun, no relation, stream this game, and I remember him having a whole chunk of trouble. At the time, I chided him. This game was for babies. How hard could the first dungeon be? Turns out, very. Even after watching Kaiju beat the dang thing only a few months ago, I had already forgotten the escape path. I felt like a dingus. Eventually I did make it out. You have to go through these random arches. The game doesn't tell you that this is possible and it's inconsistent. Only specific arches are traversable. There is no indication to know which arches these are. I found the infamous forest maze actually a bit simpler. I wouldn't dare claim it's super simple, but the idea is that you need to follow Geno on whatever path he goes on. But when Geno stopped showing up, I got scared. Believe it or not, every section of the forest maze looks identical, and I did get lost for a while. Is the music one of Yoko Shimomura's most iconic works? Yes. Was it worth the maze being awful? No. Geno is by far the most popular character from this game. Ever since I can remember, fans have been clamoring for his inclusion in the Super Smash Bros. Series. Recently, those wishes were stomped out for at least another decade with his confirmation as a Mii Fighter costume. And I'll admit, the captivating appeal of this blue boy had me under its spell for a long time. What's not to like about Geno? When he's first introduced, a magical star being says he looks stronger than Mario. He wears a bandana and has a cape. He's also capable of Geno Whirl, an attack that can deal 9,999 damage. It was not until I had matured a bit that I realized that Geno's appeal is purely superficial, as a character he has the depth of a wooden doll. His stoic demeanor and singular focus on fixing the Star Road barely meshes perfectly with the otherwise wacky cast of Super Mario RPG. Those are the words of someone who hadn't played Super Mario RPG recently. Yes, I wrote that part before I actually replayed the game. I'm leaving it in as an example of the typical Geno hater. And there's no reason to hate on Geno. Geno is awesome. I called him stoic. Pshaw, what a fool I was. Geno is full of life and charm. He talks like a medieval knight would talk if he wore a leather jacket. He's a cowboy, so he uses guns. Business casual. He would wear jeans on a Friday. I love Geno. Don't be a Geno hater. He should have been a Smash character. That line's gonna be so outdated by the time this video comes out. You know, this game's actually sort of prophetic. There's this running theme of not being able to leave your house in the beginning. People are trapped in their homes because of shysters and later arrows falling from the sky. It's almost like... Never mind. This is a dumb bit. I'm gonna cut that. By the time I made it to the Booster Pass minigame, my body and mind were vibrating on a new level. This was the second of 2 sittings that I conducted with this game. I had it set in my mind that I was gonna finish the game that night, and nothing was gonna stop me. A subtle feeling slowly washed over my entire body. Soon enough, my entire being was aglow with a sense of affinity with this game. Like all those years I had spent feeling guilty for wasting my time enjoying myself or shedding off my skin, and I was finally able to truly relax for the first time in a long time. When I played this game as a child, it wasn't for no reason. It was because I was having fun. Those memories are not something that could ever be substituted. Sure, being 13 sucked. A lot. But there were also shining moments of pure joy that cut through the everyday mundanity. And that raw emotion that was dormant inside my heart started bubbling up at this minigame that I didn't even like that much. Wait, yeah, that's weird. This minigame... I mean, it's fine, but it's not like, it's not that big of a deal. Oh, I know what happened. I was high. Okay, so a few days before I started replaying this game, I had gotten all 4 of my wisdom teeth taken out, and my face was all swollen, so I had to take pain medicine, hydrocodone. I had taken the hydrocodone at some point in my playthrough, and I think when I started writing that part, I was tripping. Yeah. It's still true, though. It's still true. When you first save Princess Peach, she's fun, she's rambunctious, and she's headstrong. Then after that, I don't think she says a word. She's pretty irrelevant to the overall story. It's cool that you get to play as her, she's just really not that interesting. And that's not me being a sexist, that's me being a feminist, because I want better female characters, like Daisy. They should make a Super Luigi RPG and have Daisy in it. People who like Peach more than Daisy, I don't trust them. Daisy is just more fun, it's a fact. Don't buy into the Peach hype. Her name is Princess Toadstool in this game, but I've been calling her Peach because I've always called her Peach. I don't want any comments telling me her name is Princess Toadstool. I know, nobody calls her that. Peach's inclusion in this game feels more like a formality. All the other characters have their own unique reasons as to why they're on this quest. Mario starts out by wanting to save Peach, and once he's done with that, he's tasked with kicking Smithy out of the Mushroom Kingdom. Smithy is currently residing in Bowser's Keep, and Bowser, for the most part of the game, just wants that back. Gino wants to fix the Star Road, which Smithy broke, and Mallow is trying to find his parents. Peach, upon hearing about what the Star Road is, she's just like, oh no, I like wishes being granted, so I guess I'll help. She feels obligated to help, that's her motivation, which does inform her character a bit. It shows that she's a protective ruler, but if I had a kingdom, I'd be pretty protective of it too. Whatever personality that her decision to join the party implies, I'm not impressed by it, but I am grateful. Super Mario RPG's difficulty curve skyrockets after Peach joins the party, and it's pretty obvious why. Like I said before, Peach is the dedicated healer of the group, so the game stops holding back and throws some real jerks at you. It's not ball busting or anything, the game's still relatively easy. You know, that's okay though, it's not everything has to be this whole big trial you have to endure. It's just trying to be simple and fun. Get off my boyfriend's back. I did get my first game over at this point though. It's one of those hidden box enemies, the box boys I believe they're called, and I don't feel bad about it. Those enemies are intentionally pieces of work to deal with. High stats, basically no weakness, I don't feel bad. There's a section in the sunken ship level where you have to complete 6 puzzles to get a hint for a password. I already knew the password, but I did the puzzles anyway, because why not? Most of them are short, simple, and pretty fun. The 3D maze is none of those things. I have not the words to comprehend, nor explain, how much this reeks of bull hockey. Curious, I looked up an X-ray map of the maze and, wow, when you lay it out like that, it seems too easy. But I assure you, it's not. The sunken ship is what I would consider the first difficult part of the game. The ghost enemies are so tough that they give you items that are expressly used to kill ghost enemies. That's how hard they are. But if you're a real gamer like myself and you don't use them, you just let them take up space in your inventory forever, like a real gamer. The most peculiar location has to be Monstro Town, which is hailed as a haven for reformed monsters. Here you'll find enemy overworld sprites repurposed as peaceful townsfolk that are all living their own lives in peace. We already knew that these monsters had character beyond just being enemies, or you would if you used Mallow's psychopath ability to read their minds. But seeing them act non-violently recontextualizes all past enemy encounters. Why did those other people want to fight me? What drove them to terrorize and harass? Are monsters born with the inherent desire to victimize others? Or maybe Mario's the real monster? It would make sense. He's leagues stronger in every measurable area. Is that why the enemies run away sometimes? What if the good thing was bad? Really makes you think. If you take a rest in this bed, Mario will be visited in his sleep by the 3 musty fears. They say they've hidden 3 invisible flags somewhere in the world, and if you find them, you'll get a prize. Well, I couldn't be bothered, honestly. I've never done this quest. I'll never do this quest. I'm sure it's not even that hard. I refuse to engage with the imperceivable. I'm sure the reward is worth it. Actually, I looked it up. It boosts your defense by 50%. That's pretty good. I would have appreciated that when I fought the Axum Rangers. Because the Axum Rangers absolutely wiped the floor with me the first time I fought them. And that meant I had to fight the Zara Dragon boss again because I forgot to save in between. These jagoffs beat my butt so bad I remembered that I never got the lazy shells. Surely, if I had the ultimate weapon and armor, I could beat these guys no problem. And maybe I would have backtracked to get them if I wasn't at the end of a decently long dungeon. In the end, I decided to just mess around with my team composition and try again. I won. This game is easy. I did get the lazy shell after though, as a reward for my efforts. You may be thinking, you kept saying the game was easy, why did you get the lazy shell? And I'll tell you, the final dungeon, Bowser's Keep, is not a fun dungeon. It goes on way too long, and there are too many fights. There's this one section where you're confronted with these 6 doors. 2 of the doors lead to long enemy rushes, 2 of them are platforming challenges, and the last 2 doors are quiz shows. You have to beat 4 of these doors to progress. Any and all momentum that the game had built up to this point is immediately dispersed as you're forced to slog through an obvious runtime extender. The 3D platforming challenges, as I've said, suck. The camera angle and controls are not suited for this type of gameplay. The combat hallways are fine enough, but I can't imagine doing them without the lazy show. I just want to get them over with. They're so uninteresting. Especially since immediately after this you get to go through a boss rush, but it's the same boss like 3 times. You can fight some old Smithy Gang members if you want, but I have no idea why I'd want to. The best option by far are the quiz show sections. You get to reminisce on all your fun experiences playing Super Mario RPG. Kinda like what I'm doing now. Wow, it all comes together. What better way to end our little adventure together than that? Huh? In conclusion, I don't know how to end videos, but I do know how to play video games. Super Mario RPG is a great game. You wanna know how I know? Because when I finished it, I was excited to play some more video games. This video initially started as an excuse to play Super Mario RPG, but now I realized that you don't need an excuse to play Super Mario RPG, because you don't need an excuse to do anything. That's a ridiculous notion in the first place. Just do it. Live your life. Be cool, man. I think that intended to be more emotionally resonant and less surfer bro. Oh well. Luigi!